Welcome back, everyone, to Dynasty Market Watch, a weekly podcast covering the shifting values of all our favorite NFL players week to week. We're here to discuss Week 3's results. My name's Matt Davis at Dynasty Peasant on Twitter. And how you guys doing, Brian and Todd?
Doing good, man. Doing good. Yeah. Brian _O'Leary 1 at Twitter. And I am officially worried about the Atlanta Falcons offense, boys. Todd, where you at?
Well, I'm not going to come in with too much optimism on a player that I'm thinking about right now either, but it's a guy that we're going to talk about later, and that's Justin Fields. And though things aren't going well, I'm excited about buying some Justin Fields. But maybe we start off on a player that is actually producing right now. We started our Bull or Bear segment last time. Let's kick it off with that. But we're going to start off with Jordan Love, who's actually putting up fantasy points right now for our teams. Well, maybe not my teams, but they're putting up for Matt's teams right now.
Matt's teams, yeah.
I'm excited to talk about Love. So that's one thing I told you guys that I wanted to kind of cover early today. So Jordan Love, as Todd said, he is QB4 through 2 weeks, or through 3 weeks, I'm sorry. And there's been a lot of discussion about Jordan Love over the last few weeks. And as we mentioned last week, I am a Green Bay Packer fan. So, take everything that you hear with a grain of salt. I'm not going to deny being a homer. The reason why I love Jordan Love through 3 weeks is, let me get the bad stuff out of the way first, because there's only one bad thing. There's only one concern with Jordan Love. Jordan Love leads the NFL in uncatchable passes. He's thrown 31.5% of his passes have been uncatchable, which per PFF leads the NFL. That's a real concern. I'm not dismissing it. If that number does not improve, any of the stuff I say going forward does not matter. He needs to improve that number, and I think he will. Now that we got that negative out of the way, I will go to the positives. Jordan Love leads the NFL in ADOT, average depth of target. He's throwing the ball further on average per attempt than any quarterback in the NFL. This includes Josh Allen, Pat Mahomes, anybody. He's taking deep shots when he has them. He also runs a little bit. I don't know his exact 40 time, but he's an athlete. He uses his speed. Matt LaFleur has him rolling out. He's already picked up some rushing production this year because of that. Those are two things that I'm looking for right away. When it comes to a young quarterback, I want them not to be afraid to throw deep. I have zero interest in fantasy or in real life about check down Charlies. I don't think they're useful for fantasy. I don't think they're useful for real life. I don't enjoy watching guys play not to lose instead of playing to win. So that's my main. Those are the two main things that I really like about Jordan Love. He's willing to throw it deep. He's mobile. He can pick up those rushing points. Those are kind of my bullish takes on Jordan Love. I know you guys are a little more skeptical than I am of him. So what are you guys seeing with him?
So Matt, I think it's apparent you are a Packers fan. I think everybody that's listening knows this. I still want to know what Love is, and I think you're starting to show me. To vaguely quote Meatloaf here. I still, like, we talked about this a little bit off air, but I'm worried about his accuracy for sure. I'm worried about some decision making at times. But you're bringing up good points in terms of rushing potential, deep ball potential. We're looking for big plays. We're looking for floor raising plays as well. I just go back to I've watched not nearly as much as you have of the Packers this year, but every time I watch, he misses a big play, and it seems to be Musgrave every time. Like this past week, he missed Musgrave up the seam for what would have been a 60-yard touchdown, and it's plays like that just kind of leave me wanting more. I guess I think that's the best way I can say it. Like I invested a lot in Love in terms of like late draft capital a couple of years ago, because why wouldn't I? It was free. Mm-hmm. So I'm not like it's not like there was a Trey Lance investment, but it's still a TBD. But I want you to keep showing me. I hope he keeps showing you, and we can keep moving forward. How about you, Todd?
So, I mean, we're a Dynasty Market Watch podcast. So let's think about his market value right now. And on KTC, he's up to QB 12. I'm not going to sit here and try to debate you on what you saw on the hashtag film. But what I'm seeing in the marketplace is that QB 12 is a high price to pay for Jordan Love. On Fantasy Calc, he's QB 11. So you're telling me that I can trade out of Jordan Love and I can go back to a guy like a Purdy or a Bryce Young or a Dak and maybe add something. I'm probably a little bit skeptical that that's possible, but if it is, I have a hard time not wanting to dabble into that a little bit. So I think there's a chance. I mean, if you think about the players, the QBs that are ahead of him kind of in the market, you're talking about CJ Stroud, Tua, Trevor Lawrence. So there's not a lot of room for him to go jumping into that next tier. So if there was ever a sell high.
Todd, I would push back on that. Why is there not room for Jordan Love to jump into that first round startup value?
There is room for him to maybe be, well, he's already being priced almost into that tier. So I'm not saying that he can't get into that, but if you think, like you mentioned PFF, his PFF passer grade through 3 weeks is 27th in the NFL. That's a problem to me.
I think that has jumped up a little bit.
It has, because he was 30th last week.
And circling back, right? So the risk play is, I think, what Todd's kind of factoring in. Like, they're building in close to, maybe not his ceiling, for the Packers fans or the true Love believers, but you're thinking about something that Jordan Love is, he has to produce this way or we're starting to lose value. I think Love is a matter of, if you've missed out on your early window, he's had too good of a start to like really be excited about buying him at his current price.
So I want to go ahead and first say I was very wrong on Jordan Love. He's obviously he's here to stay. I want to go through a really quick thought exercise on Jordan Love and the type of teams that have him in our leagues. So I'm in 13 Dynasty leagues. 6 teams in those Dynasty leagues have 4 quarterbacks. 6 of them have 3 quarterbacks, and one of them, he's one of the 2 quarterbacks. So what that kind of tells me is that half of my leagues, Jordan Love is one of 4 quarterbacks. If you want to buy him, I think there's a good chance that you could go to that team that has 4. Maybe it's not Matt, but you can go to that team and they might be prepared to sell high. And to Matt's point, maybe this isn't the highest point. So I think that there's a definite opportunity. If you go to the teams in your league, it's very difficult to trade with a team that has 3 quarterbacks and they're going down to 2 without giving them one back. But in a trade situation where they have 4, you might be able to get them off their team and run with them. And so I think that I would look in my leagues and see who has Jordan Love and how many quarterbacks do they have without me having to give one back.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to approach it. I do respect the point of, you sort of missed your buy window. The buy window was 3 weeks ago, and now if there's too much risk attached to pay his current price. I don't feel that way, by the way. I think his price on Fantasy Calculator and KTC is entirely justified. The community loves young quarterbacks, almost to a detriment. I would say that we probably care about QB age too much in Dynasty, but the market does care about it. And any young quarterback that is showing high upside for fantasy, which Love has so far, and is showing that they might be kind of good in real life, which I think Love is showing, people get deservedly excited about them. To your point about Bryce Young, Trevor, CJ Stroud, CJ Stroud's almost seeing a similar thing right now, where if you wanted to buy him, you had to do it a few weeks ago. Now you're paying a Joe Burrow or a Trevor price to get CJ Stroud probably. So that's another thing altogether. But I see where you guys are coming from. Personally, I would just say I don't see that much risk with Jordan Love. I don't agree with PFF at all. I think he's been one of the top 16 quarterbacks in the league. PFF has Ryan Tannehill better. I'm sorry, that's outrageous. Ryan Tannehill is one of the worst quarterbacks I've seen this year. after wrapping up the love discussion. So, Brian, you said you were concerned with Atlanta. I know you've been really high on a lot of their, like Drake London and Kyle Pitts at least. So, talk a little bit about why you're getting concerned.
My anxiety is ramping up, Matt. I still believe in the talent of London and Pitts. Obviously, Bijan, we've talked at length already in this short time we've been a podcast about that. I'm worried that, first of all, I think Atlanta might win too many games this year. I was expecting them to be terrible and just like be a fun team that everyone could root for. And like, this is just a fantasy like dreamland where they score 30 points and lose by 20 every game. Like, shades of Denver Broncos defense in week 3 type stuff. But they're 2-1 right now. It feels like Ritter's like good enough and weird enough that he's going to like kind of keep them in the game, and they're being super conservative of what they're doing. So even though like Pitts had 9 targets, I believe in week 3, and honestly, Ritter missed him on what should have been probably a long touchdown. My concern is it feels like every week I'm saying Ritter missed him, or he forgot, or he like tripped while he was tying his shoes, or whatever the case is. I don't want to be too much of a slam on Ritter and the play calling, but like, why are you spending this draft capital on these guys and then they're just kind of like keeping the training wheels on and not trusting or even letting anything happen? And they're just going to grind out a 10-7 season, and they're not going to have a quarterback in this class, and then we're Ritter again next year. That's what I'm worried about. Todd, what are you thinking on this front here?
Well, the sentiment that you're giving is exactly what I hope the Pitts owners are starting to feel. And so that's going to create the buy opportunity at some point. So in my leagues, I'm going to continue to kind of knock on the door for the Pitts owner and just make sure that when they decide they are ready to sell, I am there waiting. Now, I'm probably not buying on any contender teams, but in that wide receiver 15 to 20 range is probably where I would be looking. I've got several Ayuk. I wouldn't mind trying to swap out Ayuk for Pitts. I think a lot of contender teams that have Pitts probably also have a Mark Andrews, or they've got a good one that they can kind of rely on. So they might be willing to move a Pitts in order to acquire a startable player. And so that's the type of player that I'm trying to move in order to acquire Pitts on a rebuild. On a contender, it's tough. I mean, I'm probably just going to hold him. If I really need to get a starter, I might dabble in trying to move him, but I'm probably just going to hold, ride it out, view him like a future draft pick in a sense. And if I can acquire him on tanks, I'm going to do it. I'm going to capitalize, hopefully, on people starting to get a little bit squirmish.
So before you chime in here, I wanted to share. And this hurt me to my core, right? We talked about Laporta last week and how he's my rookie tight end 1. I think he's going to produce better than Pitts short term. I was offered Kyle Pitts for Laporta on a contending team after Monday night's games, and I kept telling, I talked to the guy back and forth, and I was like, listen, you catch me on any other time where I'm just uncomfortable right now. I have a ton of exposure to Atlanta. Yeah. I'm not comfortable taking on this contender, the volatility that comes with a Ritter situation right now. And it truly, to my core, I think I lost a couple hours of sleep just thinking about like, why can't I flip this for a guy that I was taking in the early second round of a startups in the offseason? It's stung. Matt, how do you feel here?
Well, just to clarify something, I know you were always a little bit higher on Kyle Pitts than Drake London, but we can use them interchangeably for the purpose of this discussion, right?
Definitely.
So, and also the one thing I wanted to check with you, Brian, just because I know the way you play, you're not selling off Pitts. You're just not buying anymore right now, right?
Correct. Yeah. So, and that is an important distinction, right? I have a ton of Kyle Pitts. Like I said, I was taking him in like 204 to 206 was my sweet spot for a startup in tight end premium leagues. I have a ton of Kyle Pitts. I have less Drake London, but it's still probably I'm still probably in the I bet you 20%. I haven't checked recently, but probably 20%. Kyle Pitts is probably closer to 30%, which is enormous for me.
Yeah, that's a high number. I'm somewhere kind of in between you guys. I don't want to move off of Kyle Pitts right now because we're still seeing the peripheral numbers are there. Like we're seeing the air yards, we're seeing the target share, we're seeing him on film, like you said, get open 80, not 80 yards downfield, but 40, 50 yards downfield for an 80-yard touchdown. And I would also say the one thing that I've seen pointed out this week, especially on the play that you're talking about, several people quoted that little video clip and said, guys, Kyle Pitts is not healthy right now. That's not him running at his full speed. And that might have been what caused a little bit of the miscommunication. But I don't recall exactly what his injury was, but I do remember him being banged up in August. So it would make sense to me if he's still kind of coming back from that injury. That could also sort of explain a little bit some of his lower usage numbers and how Jonnu was getting more targets the first couple of weeks. But I'm mostly with Todd. I am not super exposed to Kyle Pitts. I have 2 shares in 18 leagues. And because of that, I am looking to buy right now. I do have Kyle Pitts on one contending team with Dallas Goedert. And I'm not crazy about Goddard right now. So that's going to be just like a weekly decision for me, Pitts or Goddard. And I don't think I'm really going to go out of my way to try and upgrade a tight end this year because I do think Pitts is going to be useful this year. Like I don't agree with the takes that you just have to bench him every week. I do think we're going to get some usable games, but overall, I think your Arthur Smith points were good in the sense that that's an easy thing to overlook. That if Atlanta wins 10 games this year and wins the division, Arthur Smith is going to continue to have authority over this roster and build it how he wants to. And he wants a power run game. That's what he wants to do. And he wants to throw the ball 20 times or less a game. So yeah, I think there's reason to be concerned, but I think all 3 of us are kind of on the same page in terms of don't overreact, don't tilt, don't panic sell. I do think there are ways to move off of him. I'm okay adding a second to Kyle Pitts for Mark Andrews on a contender. I would definitely do that if I thought I had a strong squad. And probably a month ago, I would not have done that. I had a lot of hope for Pitts, but I think there are ways to move off of him, but I think we're on the same page. Just don't panic yet, but there's reason for concern.
Anything to add there?
Yeah. No, I mean, you did say you were buying. So if you're looking at buying Kyle Pitts, where in terms of draft capital or wide receiver, like what are you looking to purchase him with?
I'm viewing him, if I'm buying him, I have to take out what I was initially factoring in, like his ceiling. So I'm more buying him in like the tight end 5 range probably versus tight end 1. And with that, I mean, in a tight end premium, I'm certainly still paying over a first. I value, like Laporta is just the example that is the low hanging fruit. He's exploding value wise, perception wise. If you offered me, if I could offer Goddard and a second, I'm paying that for Pitts. So it's like that type of stuff that's a no brainer for me in a heartbeat.
Well, and Todd, I think you made a good point about try to look in that wide receiver 15 to 20 range, because to me, if I'm a little bit concerned about Kyle Pitts, it's for the same reasons that kind of Brian was mentioning and that we talked about. I'm concerned for this year. I don't think anyone who currently rosters Kyle Pitts in Dynasty is concerned whatsoever about his long-term outlook. I think everybody thinks he's going to be a stud eventually. The pieces will fall in place. So to that point, I'm not really trying to move future draft capital for Kyle Pitts just because I don't think it will work. I'm definitely open to moving a first and second, like a mid-first, mid-second in 2024. I think is totally reasonable. I just think you're probably going to have more success, like you said, offering that young win now player who's currently producing. So I would kind of fall in line with what you were saying. Like Ayuk, I'm happy to move Ayuk for Pitts.
Yeah.
Again, depending on my wide receiver core and team build.
Ayuk's definitely a buy for me, but I think it's a great point in great transition for our next point that we want to touch on. But Atlanta's coaching and situation right now is kind of weird. One person that is not concerned with that is Tua. Obviously, they grabbed headlines left and right. Todd, do you have any takes on Tua, or what are you thinking right now? Anything changing week to week?
So looking to buy Tua is going to be pretty difficult. I mean, whoever got him, they were seeking this out. They were hoping for this to one day happen. It did. I've got a couple Trevor Lawrence, some Lamar, and in a best case scenario, I can maybe like tier down in theory to Tua and get something on top. I just don't think the Tua owners are going to be doing that. And so I think he's kind of firmly supplanted himself into that tier with Lamar and Lawrence, maybe not quite the Lamar, but definitely with Lawrence and like the Anthony Richardson. He's surpassed, obviously like Fields and Watson and Murray and all those guys. So I think if you want to try to just pay up and pay the top end price on Tua, it's going to cost you. So I don't know that there's a lot there from a market standpoint on Tua. From a sell side, I wouldn't even really be really comfortable selling what it theoretically should cost to go from Tua to a Herbert, even though I love Herbert or I love Burrow. I just don't know, like, what's the point? Tua's downside doesn't give you rushing. Well, those guys don't really give you rushing, maybe a little bit, but not enough. So I think he's properly valued in the market. I would guess there's not a whole lot of trades going on. I haven't checked like Fantasy Calc or any of those sites, but I guess there's not a lot of trades going on right now. But Matt, where are you? Like, I don't give me an idea about how much Tua you have on your dynasty teams.
So I have two Tua shares, 18 leagues. One of the Tua shares came with. It was an orphan, actually, that you guys are both in, that three-peat league. Last year, right before the season, I believe it was Brian that asked our Twitter chat group, hey, anybody want to take this orphan? I'll pay for the first year. This guy had a dip. And I looked at it, and it looked like a league average team to me. It didn't look anything special. This was right about a year ago when Tua was probably QB 15, 16, 17 on KTC, and I was never a huge Tua fan. But I never sold that to a share, partially because it had Tyreek with him, and that stack is going back to last year has just been awesome. So I agree with every point you made. I think that right now Tua is justifiably valued right in that mid to late first tier with Herbert, with Burrow, with Trevor. I think his value is justified there. And it's just so hard to buy those first round startup QBs that I'm not really trying to either. I'm always trying to get whatever one is cheapest, and generally none of them are cheap enough for me to, go buy them. So the reason we wanted to bring up Tua, though, and this is kind of a little bit transitioning into our next segment, is there was a very popular podcast series this summer called The Play Callers on the Athletic Football Show. And it was a five-part podcast series by a reporter. I might be mispronouncing her name. I apologize if I am, but I believe her name is Jordan Rodrigue. And she covers the Rams. So she has a relationship with Sean McVay. And that kind of, out of that came this idea that a podcast series that covers Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, Mike McDaniel, and Matt LaFleur, who all have ties working together, going back under Mike Shanahan in Washington and going back to Denver before that. And we're a dynasty show. We're not film grinders and football guys necessarily. So we're not going to really get into what their scheme is that's giving them such an advantage. but you can see the results every single week. We saw Tua and the Dolphins drop 70 on the Broncos. We saw them just absolutely annihilate people going back to last year. Everybody wrote the Rams off this year, just thought they were going to literally be one of the 2 or 3 worst teams in the league. Okay, but they have Sean McVay and they have a healthy Matt Stafford, and you can kind of piece together a top 10 offense with those 2 pieces. The 49ers, everybody was pretty high on their skill guys. A lot of people did not trust Brock Purdy, myself included. A lot of people still don't think Brock Purdy is that good, myself included. None of it matters. Brock Purdy is a very good fantasy option, and he's the driver of that train, and he can handle it. And then, my team, Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love and the Packers, they were consistently undervalued all offseason because not only, I think it was a lot of Jordan Love skepticism, which is definitely fair. I think there's something to the fact that these play callers are allowing their quarterbacks to play the game on easy mode. That's not going to go away. That is sustainable. So that's why I am very comfortable investing in these quarterbacks if I think they are going to be that quarterback for a few years. Tua, there's no reason that they're going to get rid of Tua. Tua is going to sign an extension with Miami and Mike McDaniel. And that's part of the reason why I'm so bullish on, Tua and, Jordan Love. And we can talk about some of the other players from the system and, where their value lies. But that's why I think you shouldn't shy away from investing in Tua. This Miami offense is going to be one of a historically good offense, in my opinion, for the next couple of years. But Brian, what are you seeing about it?
So Matt, I think you're making strong points for sure. And when we're speaking dynasty versus NFL success, I think what we are trying to establish here is you can always find potential values or things that you might be ahead of the market for, right? And these types of teams with this type of coaching, you have one of 2 things, like maybe an undersized guy that gets open in space, but Atlanta doesn't know how to use him. But if he's in LA with the Rams and McVay, all of a sudden Tutu Atwell might be someone that is in play. Or this guy that is maybe not as talented as what his numbers are showing right now, like Dobbs. I don't think he's a supremely talented wide receiver, but without Christian Watson, he's putting up some really solid numbers. With Matt's opinion aside, some people still have questions, including PFF, with Jordan Love. So I think it's important to understand that. Yeah, we want to preach that you want talent, absolutely. But most teams are going to have talent. It's how the coaches are going to utilize it. That's how I'm seeing it. So, as an example, this is extreme. Obviously, the Dolphins scored 70 points. They had 2 different guys that scored 4 touchdowns. They had their backup quarterback produce like a top 25 QB week or something crazy. Yeah. And 18 teams, 1-8 have not scored 70 points in 3 games. The Dolphins are scoring that in 1. Yes, it's a hapless Broncos defense that clearly just laid down and rolled over, but it's something of note that you want to keep track of and keep tabs on and make sure that you're understanding what is this scheme going to do that potentially highlight this player that has some type of shortcoming, because most players are not going to be your Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, slap you in the face talent, and they're just going to do good no matter where they are. So that's how I'm kind of viewing this coaching situation. I think both of you have kind of shed some light on that. To me personally, off this podcast, and I think it's something that I think most people, if not all, should be applying, and at least they're in their thought process. So Todd, what do you think?
Yeah. So quickly before we kind of head into our rookie watch update, so yep. I want to kind of reel us back into the market value of what we're talking about here. So one really strong example to me on this, and I know the Vikings were not necessarily talking about that coach, but that coach, Kevin O'Connell, really pushes QB pass volume. So they are throwing the ball a lot. And in rookie drafts, the question was kind of at that 107, 108 was Addison or QJ. That was a big one. And I think we forget about how much we trade and how quickly we can trade these guys. And I know I forget that. And I think the Addison versus QJ decision, with them being in the same tier, should have been an easy one to just take Addison, knowing that they're going to throw it 40 plus times a game, and you could quickly turn him weeks into the season. I've already traded him. We talked about it last week. Traded up to T. Higgins. So I think that's one aspect of the play callers, knowing who has the volume. I do want to reiterate, though, like I'm firmly like talent over situation. Like that's where I lie. But we can go through. I mean, there's a slew of players like with these teams, like the Rams. They have all these second rounders that just totally flop. You got Van Jefferson, Tutu Atwell until year 3. You could have gotten him off waivers. Akers, the 49ers had Danny Gray from the 3rd round. They had Trey Sermon. Minnesota with all this volume that I just talked about. They had KJ Osborne last year. It's terrible. So I think Madison's flopping this year. Like, so it's not just about the situation. Like, you got to be good. But if we're getting good players in those situations, that's when it can be like a double whammy where you have QJ in a situation where it's not so hot right now. Maybe it turns, with his new opportunity after the injury to Mike Williams. But Addison popped in with the first few weeks, and you've got a lot of volume. So kind of talking about rookies, let's kind of switch into that mode, talking about our rookie risers. One guy that I really want to talk about is Rashee Rice. So Rashee Rice is somebody who I had zero interest in the rookie draft. Absolutely no shares. I still have 0, but he is a guy that I am looking to get a part of. In the 2nd round, I'm looking to add some running backs. Throw me a Tank Bigsby, throw me a Tyjae Spears. I had no interest in Rashee Rice. And so now, after seeing, his PFF receiving grade, what he's doing in his limited opportunity, I think that there's a little bit of something there. I'd be interested to hear your all's take on Rashee Rice. I know, Brian, I offered to acquire him from you, I believe yesterday. You rejected me, but I wanted to see if I could grab one before we talked. But
you wanted to do this on air,
yeah. Well, I tried to send you Jerome Ford. I can't remember if I think you're a contender in that league. I'm rebuilding, so getting a guy like Rashee Rice is right up that team's alley. But interested to hear your take on Rashee Rice. How much did you all get in the rookie drafts, and what are y'all trying to do with him now? That you've seen a little bit, but the issue is I don't know that there's a lot of market value out there for him. But anyways, Brian, where are you at with him?
Yeah. So I was just about to bring up that trade. I was pulling it up to make sure that I was quoting the correct trade offer. I thought it was Jerome Ford. It definitely made me think, but it was a matter of longevity. I think Rashee Rice, it seems like even though his snap count isn't great through 3 weeks, he's getting touches and they want him involved. I like guys that are desired by the Chiefs to actually be within their game plan. Like as just a quick detour. I bought 2 different shares of Jerick McKinnon this week before the game. I just thought that he was so prevalent in their game plans last year when they were so successful. For his first 2 weeks to kind of be like nothing. They were going to try and get him involved. And I think that was a cheap dividend, paid dividends. I bought him for a third 2 different times. So Rashee Rice, I'm a fan of his. I'm under, I want to say like 8 or 9% with him exposure wise. He was a good target in like the late 2, early 3 range. Anytime I couldn't package that late 2, early 3 plus early 2 for a late 1 type of thing, he was one of my targets for sure. Roshan was the other one that but he started to get kind of hyped up. So then I faded him after a while, but so he was Rashee Rice. I like him as a player. I think he's got a good outlook. I think this is one of those ones where we like anointed Sky. We anoint all these other guys within the Chiefs offense. And I could see him being the guy that is the next man up, I guess. Okay. So
what are you buying for? What are you selling for?
I would ask for,
or if they bleed together.
Yeah. I'd sell for a 2, probably, just because I like that as like a safe bet. But it would be like a team that I think is like pretty questionable and might be an early 2. Jerome Ford, I think I've seen him be sold for a 2, but I don't know if that like
I've already traded him
wise.
since then, so there's no harm, no foul.
Yeah, I don't have to feel bad. Yeah, perfect. That's the ideal situation. I get to keep my guy, you get to get your return, and everybody wins. But yeah, I think selling is definitely different. Buying, I'm not paying it. I'm not paying a 2, like an early 2 for him. I might a contending 2 if I wanted to like kind of liven up my potential receiving core down the line, that type of thing. If I'm like, I have a couple teams where I'm going to probably actually, now that I'm thinking about this, like I have like a Tyler Lockett or that type of receiver, DeAndre Hopkins, like that older guy that I thought was going to be part of a good contending team that's kind of struggling out of the gates. Those are the types of teams that I'm kind of starting to identify, like, hey, do I want to move the chips in, or do I want to try and, move off them and kind of get younger and more agile? That is something that I'll probably investigate a little bit this next week or two. I see like week 3, week 4 is a really good first decision making point for whether you want to rebuild or contend, because I don't really see anything besides those 2 things. Matt, how about you?
Yeah, it actually fits well with the Rookie Watch segment. I only made one Rashee Rice offer recently. It was a couple days ago. Actually, it was just yesterday, and it was quickly rejected. And I think Rashee Rice is not a guy I'm trying to buy individually. I'm not throwing a second to the owner for Rashee Rice. I'm putting Rashee Rice in a package. And so what I tried to do here in this league, I have Trevor Lawrence. Now, C.J. Stroud is a guy we talked about a little bit last week, and after C.J. Stroud just absolutely kicked Lawrence's ass this weekend, I cannot be more bullish on C.J. Stroud. So I think C.J. Stroud already belongs in that tier that we were putting Tua in. I would put him right there with Trevor Lawrence. So in this league, I offered Trevor Lawrence for C.J. Stroud and Rashee Rice, rejected instantly.
Really?
Yeah, so the Stroud owners, I think that was Stroud, not Rashee Rice, but I think it could have been both of them. But if I was that Stroud owner, I would have rejected that too. I would have been like, okay, Stroud's on pace to throw for 6,000 yards this season, something outrageous. He's already shown he can play QB at a high level in his first 3 games. So to me,
it's funny to me because I'm not like disputing your opinion, because it's simply that it's rooted in, your strong opinions. But
yeah, Stroud
was pretty widely 105, 106 rookie pick. And then you're adding a 3 and you're not getting Trevor Lawrence. You're getting snap decline. That is a crazy shift in 3 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. And we see it all the time. Again, this kind of one of the reasons that we were interested in doing a podcast like this was for those specific scenarios. I thought it was I almost asked for more. I almost asked for Stroud, Rice in a second. But and I think you guys know this about me, a lot of times I will throw out close to my best offer right away. And that was my best offer. I'm not, as high as I am on Stroud, I am not moving Trevor for Stroud straight up. I'm not moving Trevor for Stroud in a third. I need some tangible piece to make that swap. And Rice is just tangible enough for me to want to make that swap. And I thought he was going to accept it, but I was as surprised as you were when he rejected it, but I also understood it. So that's what I'm trying to buy Rice for right now. A package like that.
I have some offers to make, I think, after this.
So speaking of Stroud is another rookie that's on the rise. How about the guy that he's throwing to, Tank Dell? We talked about Nico Collins a good bit last week. Tank Dell is another guy that I've got a little bit of. I actually traded him Friday or Saturday going into week 3 last week. He seems to be still kind of undervalued. I kind of mentioned on the last podcast, looking at calculators and how throughout the week after a big game, they don't have quite enough time to adjust. I think he's one right now that's probably going to slowly adjust as we get closer to week 4. Like on KTC, he's in like the wide receiver mid 40s. I think he's probably justifiably in the mid 30s from a wide receiver standpoint. And I don't think you have a chance of buying him probably even for a mid 30 wide receiver. I've gotten a couple people poking around trying to ask for him, and they're just, it's not even close. It's like, and I wouldn't even call myself that high on him, but the market is shifting in his direction. It's just shifting around this whole Texans offense.
Yeah.
So Tank Dell, I'm curious if you would buy. I would even, with Rashee Rice, I wouldn't pay a second. I would probably pay a second pretty easily for Tank Dell. I would definitely pay like a late second in a player, like a running back, like a backup running back type of deal. I have a hard time believing that you're probably going to be able to trade for him. So I'd be curious, a few guys here that with Tank Dell that are in that mid 30s range, would you rather have them? I'll just kind of throw them out there and kind of give me an idea of where you stand. So Brian, like if I'm looking at Tank Dell, would you rather have him versus like a DJ Moore, Terry McLaurin, Mike Evans, that grouping?
Oh man, oof!
I love that the first name you mentioned is DJ Moore. That just because of the polarizing nature of DJ Moore, and a lot of us have.
Yeah, so really quickly, so these are guys that DJ Moore, McLaurin specifically, these are guys that are pretty valuable. We know they're talented, but they're not producing. And like Tank Dell might outproduce them the rest of the year. You might get more out of Tank Dell, who is 3-4 years younger than these guys the rest of the year. So it's really interesting value review with these guys. So
it's super interesting because I think, like you said, DJ Moore, Terry McLaurin especially, they're like the just wake up, be a wide receiver too. And I don't like acquiring those guys unless I have a very specific need and a value to buy them. So to answer your what I thought you were going to ask, have I bought any Tank Dell? Have I tried to buy any Tank Dell? No, because I think he's just too hot of an item right now. I think it's similar to Laporta, which we'll probably touch on a little bit more because I can't stop talking about him. But it's a hard time to buy them. But I don't know. Like it's kind of like the Nico Collins type as it's not died, but it's slowed a little bit after 1 week of meh. So I would rather buy Tank Dell after next week when he has 3 catches for 35 yards or something like that. And I still think he's the same player. I'm not going to value him any differently, but maybe other people are. But right now he had that long touchdown. He was the guy basically, and he kind of started to come onto the scene during week 2. So and obviously CJ Stroud, people are fawning over to the point of not trading him for Trevor Lawrence. So, I mean, circling back, it's someone that I'm not sure I can get, and I don't think I would feel comfortable trying to acquire DJ Moore. I would try if I had DJ Moore or Terry, I would try and get a plus on top of Tank Dell if I were receiving him, and they're going to decline inevitably, and we'll go our separate ways. I think that's my best answer I can give you, unfortunately. How about you, Matt?
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. We'll touch a little bit later on. Our last segment here is going to cover our buy recommendations from last week, and mine was Nico Collins, and it was a very good reminder that don't try to buy a guy coming off his career best game. The market is not going to react rationally to that. So I think you made the best point there. He's just too hot of an item. He is going to have a dud, whether it's next week or 2 weeks from now. Go try and buy him then. He's a guy I only have one share of. I did try to buy him before this past week's games where I saw just enough. And to me, he rose into that level of mid to late second as a buy before this past breakout game. And so in one of my leagues, I did offer my buddy Shade what looks like a late second. It belongs to the best team in the league right now. So I offered him that second for Tank Dell, thinking, Shade got Tank in the 4th round of rookie draft. Maybe he just wants to take a late second, double his profit right now. And he rejected it. And he was like, nah, I gotta hold on. And then when I was talking to him this morning about Tank Dell, and I was like, oh yeah, I kind of wish I went a little bit harder at him. And he sent me an offer of a mid 24 first for Tank Dell. And I was like, all right, come on, man. So, all right, I like you said, missed the Tank buy window. There will be another one. That's the thing to remember. And so I'm not going crazy with any kind of Tank Dell offers this week, but he is a guy that I am interested in, that I do think is good. And I am going to be looking at putting him in offers the rest of the season, I think.
And just on that topic, I think that's a nice segue for our next person that you might have missed your buy window, or the initial buy window anyways, depending on how frisky you are. Devin, a chain.
I was hoping
you want to say it. I don't know, because it changes every week, as does his value. So I remember, in our group chat, everyone's, especially Brian, the Dolphins fan, was hyping how he was going to be the superstar and blah, 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 blah. And then JT is potentially getting traded to Dolphins. So he's an absolute dud. So why would we ever want him? Now he has 4 touchdowns against a team that just lied down and said, score touchdowns as much as you want. So it's one of those things for me, for that player, I would be scared to buy him at his height now. Again, we're talking about something that is going to, in theory, drop down in value again at some point. Yeah. I don't know. How are you guys feeling with that? Is this something that I can buy him now and, still profit later? Todd, what do you think?
Well, I mean, he's up to like running back 12 on a lot of the market indices. So, I mean, yeah, you can go give it a whirl. I don't see that as working. I mean, I didn't get much of him, but you were paying late first prices for him. I'm going to call him because I'm going to not try to say his last name. But Devon, you were paying late first prices. Maybe you got lucky and got him in the early second. So yeah, now you could maybe try to cash out at first. I guess you're just going to roll it into that. So maybe you could cash out for a first and something. I think you probably just let it ride. I'm not going to be looking to buy. Maybe I go to if I have him, I go to all 11 owners and just see if there's somebody that's just willing to give the world. But I don't know that there's a lot there. I mean, the Tank Dell window is maybe only partially open. This one feels brutally closed, very much like Sam Laporta. So it's probably more of a look to sell, but don't just sell to sell. Look to sell for maybe a running back in the 12 to 15 range and get a nice plus. And only do it with somebody that's all in.
Todd, are you selling for a 1+2? Because I've seen that is the asking price.
Yep.
Yeah, I would just sell for a 1+2. Yeah, I would sell for a 1+2. I think if you're a contender, one thing that you might look to do, and I think we're actually going to talk about some vets here in a minute. We can maybe just segue into it momentarily, but maybe you go and get an older running back. You also get something young. Maybe you've got to make it a 2-for-2 deal. But maybe you're dealing with somebody that's all right. They're 0-3. They're looking to rebuild. They've got Josh Jacobs on their team. He's done nothing for them. You swap out Achane for Jacobs. Maybe you give him a second as a pick. Maybe you get something else also that kind of wets your whistle for your contender team. That'd be probably the type of thing that I'm looking to do.
So you're thinking like a buy low that we kind of know what Jacobs is, plus something as like a flyer, like a 2. So that makes sense. So you'd rather a proven player +2 than a 1+2 in this situation, like.
Yeah, because he could keep going higher. I think that we know, coming back to our play callers, we know that McDaniel wants to use a couple running backs. He's not going to keep getting 18 carries per game. I do think that they're going to absolutely keep him involved. But to expect, there's going to be a week where he goes for like 20 yards. That's going to happen because he's going to have 8 carries, and a team's just going to say, we're not going to give up anything on the run, and Tua probably throws for 400, and you're like, wow, Echan scored 2 points. That will eventually happen. So I think that it would make sense for me to probably just cash out on him, only if I can get just something crazy. If somebody's willing to pay like running back 8 prices. I'm not just selling out at RB12 just because. I'm selling out at something that somebody comes in with just a killer offer, and I'm like, I just got to take it.
Yeah, sure. Matt, what's your price buy sell?
Yeah, so if I'm a rebuild team, if I'm not contending, I want a 1 and 2. Brian, you're in that perfect 12 league that I'm commissioner of, where I'm kind of doing a 1-year punt, and I took some flack from one specific guy, shout out Maine, who seemed almost offended. Offended is not the right word, but he was very surprised and pushed back very hard that when I said, hey, I want a 1 and 2 for A-Chain, and I listed him on the block. And he was, that's an overreaction to one game, blah, blah, blah. And then, I'm showing him Twitter screenshots of guys asking for 2 firsts and stuff like that. So I was like, I'm trying to be reasonable here. So if I'm on a rebuild, I do not want to keep A-Chain, and I'm going to just call him A-Chain for the rest of the episode. I vow between this week and next week, I will learn how to pronounce this man's name because he deserves it. But I've been calling him A-Chain all year, so that's just what I'm used to doing.
But he doesn't deserve to stay on your rebuild.
No, and that's just, I do not like to carry high value young running back, high value any running backs on a rebuild. They get hurt too often. If he tears his ACL next week, I'm going to be pissed I didn't move him for someone with a little bit safer, more insulated value. So I'm not rushing to get rid of him. Like I let the entire league know, hey, the price right now is a 1 and 2. Now, if he goes and gets 120 yards and 2 touchdowns this week, hey guys, that price is going up a little bit, and maybe I'm just going to hold him the whole year because nobody wants to get him. But I'm not selling for less than a 1 and 2 after what he showed this past week. Now, if I'm buying him, it's because I'm a contender. Again, I'm not buying any kind of running back on a rebuild ever. So if I'm buying him on a contender, I'm probably just going to go for someone safer, right? So I'm not really like Aaron Jones, for example. Again, not to be a homer, but Aaron Jones looks awesome in week 1. He looked great last year. He still has it or whatever. He's not washed. He's not even falling off a little bit. So I'm targeting a guy like that. Before his injury, I would have been targeting, Nick Chubb. Now we can say Tony Pollard. Those type of guys are who I'm going after on contenders. I don't want the week-to-week fluctuation that I think is going to be him the rest of the year. Now, if I'm selling him on a contender, it's for a similar thing. Now, so if I have him on a contender, I'm going to the Pollard owner and saying, okay, what do you want? Do you want A-Chain in a 2? Because I'd be willing to do that. I'd throw a mid to late 2 on top of A-Chain for Pollard, but I'm a big Pollard guy. So there's no real team build that I'm looking to buy him right now, and a lot of that has to do with what you said about Laporte or what you said about Tank Dell. It's just too hot of a name right now. So if I want to buy, I'm going to wait for a better opportunity than this specific week after he goes for 50-plus fantasy points. But in general, on my contenders, I'm probably not really looking to buy a running back like that. I'm looking for safer, more consistent production.
Let's talk about one rookie that is not performing well. Well, maybe not performing well. He didn't perform great. Didn't get good reviews, and that's Bryce Young, and now he's hurt. So I want to ask about, should we be kind of reconsidering what we're seeing from Stroud and think, should we dabble in the Bryce Young market and be looking to get him? When I was trying to think through how would I go about acquiring a Bryce Young, I really think there's two ways. The only two ways you could do it would be if he's on a contender and you move a Cousins or a Goff and they need some instant production. Most of the spots where I've seen him, he's like the QB3. So it's not even like they really need something right now. So maybe that's one to monitor. Does their QB go down? The other one would be, Brian, are you willing to take a Trevor Lawrence or even like a Herbert or Tua, one of those guys, trade down to Bryce Young? It's on a rebuild, I'm sure. Trade down to Bryce Young and add a slew of picks. Maybe we got to figure out what that is. But are you comfortable making that tier down to Bryce Young?
I'm not.
Even if you're getting like a couple first or even a couple first and a couple.
So there's obviously things that can ease my mind for sure. To preface this, I was not the biggest Young guy entering the league. Stroud was my QB1 until Richardson went where he went. Then Richardson became my QB1, Stroud 2, Young 3. I think that was pretty clear cut. The only Youngs I have are when I had 106, or I just said, hey, I want to just kind of be fun and diverse here and shift. That being said, I think Bryce Young isn't at his ceiling or floor, so it's a matter of, like, he's still very much an unknown to me. His size concerns are going to initially label him as something less than what maybe he is, including for myself. But with that, with a couple good weeks, with some more talent on offense, they just don't have a lot of talent, in my opinion. Hopefully his coaching staff can find a way to utilize his strengths the best that they can. Kind of what we talked about with, the previous coaches we spent a long time on. So Bryce Young plus 2 1s. If I thought one of the ones was a good shot at being a low to mid, I would probably do that. But if it's 2 like contending ones, I'm not doing that.
Shift Stroud into that position now.
Stroud,
it's like Herbert.
Yes,
we're talking about Herbert.
Yeah.
So you just feel more comfortable with Stroud. So Matt, one trade I made this offseason in a league, I think we're in Cream. I traded away Bryce Young, JMO. This is in the offseason. Bryce Young, JMO, and my 24 first to tier up to Herbert. I assume you would feel pretty comfortable making that tier up. Yeah. Coming back down, how do you feel about trading from a Herbert and getting Bryce Young and a couple firsts?
I would need 3 firsts. So like Herbert, Burrow, Lamar, to me, those guys are 4+ firsts in value. They're about 4 firsts, I would say. If you're just trying to buy them individually with draft picks, which, most of the time you're not doing, but I would value them around 4 firsts. And I don't value Bryce Young as more than a first, a mid first. I didn't have a great feel for how to evaluate him as an NFL prospect. I did watch a decent amount of Alabama the last couple of years. Anybody that is familiar with college football, I think knows that Alabama's wide receiver core was awesome with Tua and Mac, and it fell off hard with Bryce. Bryce did not have the same talent that he was throwing to at Alabama that Mac or Tua did, or Stroud up in OSU. So I wasn't sure how to separate all that, how to filter it. I just didn't have a strong take on Bryce Young or CJ Stroud for that matter, really. I preferred Stroud over Young, but by, just a margin. Like I basically said, hey, let's see when these guys get to the NFL. Now I am a little concerned with Bryce Young. I am a little bit concerned about his size. I am a little bit concerned that Andy Dalton, who I do think is an underrated veteran quarterback, the offense looked 10 times better with him than Bryce Young. That's a concern to me. And I know it's early with Bryce, but Stroud has the same level of experience, and you're not seeing any kind of struggles from him. He looks awesome. So yeah, I'm concerned with Bryce, and I'm not trying to tear down from the elite quarterbacks to Bryce. I am keeping an eye on the buy Bryce Young window this year, though, because I think a lot of Bryce owners. I have a single Bryce Young share, or no, I actually have two. I have two Bryce Young shares. Both of them are on full rebuilds. I'm just going to be patient. I'm not looking to move them, but I'm listening to offers. So, if you're in one of those leagues and you're interested in Young, I would probably add something to him for CJ Stroud, something like that. But Young is just not a guy I'm looking to buy right now. I don't think we need to.
I think we're all on the same page, and we're talking Young, and this is a great time, I think, that for us to shift to the olds, right? Todd mentioned this. I like to call them old faithfuls. These are guys that you can buy, and in the offseason, especially for that ageist discount. If you're not familiar or comfortable or understand what's going on there, people in Dynasty, they love the new toy. They love that young, shiny thing that they can be right about, and they'll take that 9 times out of 10 over the proven guy. So we're talking Tyreek. We've talked about, Keenan Allen, Diggs, Kelsey. Those are guys that they will win you championships. They will win you money. They will bring pride to your family. All of the good stuff, right? Those are guys that, like, I could not buy enough Keenan Allen in the offseason for a single two.
Yeah.
Justin Herbert, he's healthy. To me, he looked great before he got hurt. He always looks great before he gets hurt. So I don't want to go too far and like push him into week 4 infirmary or anything like that. But these are guys, in my opinion, that are a perfect time to buy now. And if we're talking the flip side, sell during the season. Do not, if you have these players on your team and you're anxious and saying, I need the tank, sell them in the season when you're going to get appropriate or maybe above what their value is, because people want to score points at that point. People don't want to score points in the offseason. So sell your Kelsey or your Tyreek Hill in season when you're like, okay, yeah, I'm 0-3 or 1-2. My max points are towards the bottom of the league. Let's ship Kelsey and get him to somebody that is really going to overpay him, and understand that they're just adding this guy that is going to skyrocket their team stock, right? Matt, what are you thinking here?
No, it's a great point. It's one that I've gotten better at, like literally just this year, maybe. But I've always been guilty of that, right? Selling vets in May or July or June and not waiting until the season starts. And a lot of it is because, people are very wary of having even 1 week of explosive points on their roster when they're in a, tank for Bijan or a tank for Caleb race. Some of those races are so intense that literally every point matters. So I understand wanting to get the value off or get the points off your roster before they start counting. But this year has been a great reminder that you need to just wait. Buy these veterans in the middle of the summer. And conversely, now is a great time to buy draft picks, specifically 2025 draft picks. Contenders are more than happy to throw around their own picks. Contenders are more than happy to throw around surplus picks that they've accumulated to get the guys that you mentioned, especially the top tier ones. Like you said, the league winners, Tyreek, Kelsey, CMC. If I was a contender, I'm easily trading 2 mid-first next year for CMC. I think he's going to help me win the league, and, banners hang forever. So go, So yeah, I mean, those are the type of guys that it's very important. We cannot stress enough to time when you're going to buy and sell these guys. It's hard to buy some of those guys right now. That's why the CMCs, the Tyreeks, the Kelseys, I'm not buying them right now. If I was going to, I already bought them in the summer. Right now, I am looking for the Mosterts, right? The Lockett's. Right now, I'm looking for the older guys that like you said, cost like Keenan Allen, and now is not a great time to buy him after his 45-point explosion. But people did not want that guy a couple weeks ago. So, but those are the type. Anything less than a first of value, those are the type of veterans I'm targeting right now. So, yeah.
So the first thing that I'm doing, if I'm looking at trying to acquire a contender piece, your Keenan Allens, your Tyreeks, your Adams, like those guys are going to be very difficult to acquire. You just alluded to that. They've been going off. So we're probably more shifting to guys that are a little bit less sexy. Now maybe you can go and get some of those high end guys. If you're keeping an eye on teams that thought they were contenders that are flopping, they probably haven't quite flopped yet. So you may not have that opportunity yet, but it's something to keep in mind. But a few guys that I would be looking at that, believe me, they're not fun to talk about, but like James Conner, Miles Sanders. I just bought Miles Sanders. I think we talked about it last week, but I bought Miles Sanders for a couple thirds and Tank Bigsby. Not any kind of crazy value, but one thing I'm doing if I'm buying a Miles Sanders is, can I start him in the foreseeable future? And I had a team with the Eckler and Kupp and Jonathan Taylor, all those guys out. Miles Sanders was going to for sure start for me for about 4 or 5 weeks. And so guys like that, more so with running backs, I'm probably looking to get them later in the year when I know they're healthy. So a receiver that I might be looking to get would be like a Jacoby Myers right now. He's going to be tough to buy because of how well he's been performing, but the person that has them, that's a contender, that's a rebuild, they may want to get his points off the team. So you might be able to just send a 2 his way. Deontay Johnson's kind of being forgotten about because he's injured. So that's another one.
I love that one.
Yeah. And then the other one, I'm going to actually leave one off that I know that Matt wants to use later. But then the other one would be Michael Thomas, just kind of keeping an eye on him. So a lot of these guys are probably on contenders. I'm probably just trying to look to move like a 2 value. It may not be necessarily an actual 2, but it could be a Rashee Rice, or it could be like one of those guys plus a third, whatever it is, to try to get that 2 value, but a guy that you can slide in. But I'm only trading for them if I know I'm going to start them. I'm not trying to trade for these guys for depth. I can trade for a starter in week 9 if I need it, and I know they're healthy at that point, and they might be playing well. Which, I mean, any of these guys I just mentioned, they could go in the tanker the rest of the year.
So Todd, we talked about this a little bit off air in our group chat this afternoon. Miles Sanders is someone that I am also targeting. I think I've bought 2 or 3 of him before last Sunday's, this most recent game, and now. And my most recent deal, just for some context, we talked about this. So I received Miles Sanders and Brandon Ayuk, gave Kendre Miller my 25 third, an early to mid 24 2, and then a mid to late 24 1. So that's just another tangible. That is something that if that sounds spicy to you, I was kind of shifting from a pretender to a contender in this situation. Miles Sanders slots into my running back 2, 3, depending on how you see Mixon and Mostert, and then Ayuk becomes my wide receiver 1 or 2. So those are the types of things I totally agree with you in the sense of you want to target those types of situations, and it is situational. That it's just important to really drive that home. You're not acquiring Miles Sanders for a next year team build or anything like that. I'm selling Miles Sanders for less on a non-contender because I want to get those points off. He's going to score some for sure, right?
And if you're looking to sell a Miles Sanders or any of these guys we just talked about, you just mentioned a team shifting from a pretender to a contender. I'd be going and looking at those teams that may have just gotten lucky and they were 3-0 now, or they're 2-1, and they've got maybe some false hope. And maybe those are the guys that you can sell a Miles Sanders to, or Jacoby Myers.
You're telling me that I'm the mark in this situation.
You were the mark. You got taken advantage of. No, so I think that's. But with running back though, I'm only buying though if I know I can start them. I'm not adding a James Conner or Miles Sanders if they are not immediately going into my starting lineup that week. maybe into next week, but it's not like I'm trying to bolster my depth. I don't really care if I've got James Conner for week 6, week 7.
Yeah.
I'm going to need him later. But if I'm going to use him now, then go ahead and trade for him now.
Matt, any real quick feedback on either that trade, the Miles Sanders in general, or those buy low type of guys that will give you nice quality production short term?
No, I mean, I don't have a lot of feedback. I would say Miles Sanders is an interesting buy low target, like you said, just because nobody's excited about the offense. He has a kind of a history before last year of mediocre production, but he's getting a lot of targets, and even Chuba is getting targets. So I think Carolina is trying to throw the ball to their backfield just because lack of options, more or less.
Sure.
So I do think Miles is a pretty solid buy low there.
Really quick before we kind of shift into our trades, I think we've talked about some of these rookies, so like Achane, for example. That's the type of kind of golden ticket you can dangle to get to a CMC or to get to an Eckler from a team that may be kind of starting to middle out. And they're like, okay, I can use a Achane and maybe I can still try to contend, but I'm going to get way younger. So you can like trade something plus Achane to move into CMC if you're like, all right, this is my time. I'm ready to win. So they get to kind of play the middle ground, not a place that I want to play my teams. I don't want to be in the middle ground, but I know a lot of people just kind of want to hang around, make the playoffs, and see what happens.
Yeah.
So moving from a Achane to a CMC or an Eckler, that would be really appealing to me. That's the one where I'm like, all right, you knocked my socks off. I'm ready to sell.
Yeah.
Let's do this. Yeah. So we're talking trades, Todd. Why don't you just take it? Why don't you give us your trade of this past week?
Yeah, so I brought up Fields at the beginning. I traded a 25-1 and a 25-2. I planned for them both to be late, but I've traded both of those for Justin Fields. So 25-1, 25-2 for Justin Fields. I am ready to just keep buying. I've got 4 Justin Fields of my 13 Dynasty leagues. I know he's been bad. It's been ugly.
Real quick, like Todd, what is your QB situation on this specific team that you traded him for?
So I have Lamar and I have Daniel Jones, and I'm a contender. And the way I viewed it was Daniel Jones.
This is back to school, right?
This is back to school. I wouldn't consider myself the best team in the league. I think, Brian, actually, your team is probably the best team in the league. You've got all these old guys that we're talking about. I have more youth. I've got Chase. I've got A.J. Brown. I've got DK Metcalf. I think I've got Ayuk, Barkley, ETN. So I've got a good team. We're pretty young.
That team's awesome.
Yeah, the team's fun. It's a very fun team, but didn't have the QB2 situation. I wanted to hold Daniel Jones while acquiring Fields because let's say Fields just flops. Okay, Daniel Jones isn't good, but I've got another QB. I'm not out surfing the web looking for another one. So trading the 1 and the 2. In Dynasty, I'm really trying to take risks. I'm trying to make a juggernaut, and I'm trying to take risks to make that happen. So sure, this could fall on my face, but the way I kind of look at it with a 25-1 and 2, maybe I could have traded it for something else later. But when you get on draft day, that pick itself, I think, can easily turn into a player that's just depth. So I'm not a real advocate of just like selling off my picks. But if I've got a guy like a Fields that in a year from now could be back in that top 10 QB range, just feels like a good opportunity to try to make a juggernaut.
And to just real quick, I don't have a super polarizing opinion. I'm sure Matt will, shocking with the Packers and the Field stance that he has. But I think it's important to illustrate that you do have the rest of your team built out pretty strong and young. So you're not like me in back to school where I have Aaron Jones and Derrick Henry and Christian McCaffrey and Diggs and this guy and that guy. My cliff is coming. It's coming quick probably. And I'm just trying to drain out everything I can before it does. You're in a good spot long-term, longevity-wise, league-wise. I think you're one of those guys that is going to be in a great spot. and this is a nice calculated risk for you. It's going to be a late one probably, unless something catastrophic happens, and your risk is minimized, and you're buying Fields at almost like what he was last year, where people are just like giving him away. This isn't quite a giveaway, but it's certainly a value that you can attack at a later date as well.
Yeah, I want to kick the mat because I want to hear the flack from this. But one point when you think about trading for a Fields is if it does go bad, I do personally think he will kind of be a quarterback somewhere. But even like later in the year, if it's still going bad, I can probably trade him and just cut my losses at some point for a old quarterback that's just like going to get me some points, maybe better than Daniel Jones. Like if everything goes wrong, Fields goes wrong, Daniel Jones goes wrong, I could probably move somehow and just take a guy that's like on his last leg and just like a Stafford, something like that, and just cut my losses. But anyways, Matt, let me hear what you think about the 25-1 and 25-2 for Justin Fields.
Well, I mean, so your team sounds kind of loaded almost. Like you sound like you're in a really good position. So I am confident those are probably going to be late picks. I don't have a lot to say about the Fields thing, except because I did kind of cover it last week. I will just simply say, to me, I no longer view Fields as a risk-reward guy. I do not see any reward there. I think he cannot play the position of quarterback. I don't think that's going to improve. I think he's going to be out of the league in a couple of years, and I don't think he might start next year. I'm not ready to say he's not going to, but I expect it to be very similar to another former Bears quarterback, Mitch Trubisky, where if Fields does get a shot next year, it's going to be competing against another young guy or rookie. I do not think he's going to be handed a starting job going into camp next year with any team in the NFL. So that's my only kind of Fields take. I just don't see any reward left there. I just don't think he can play the position.
All right.
For the record, I also
trade of the week.
I also don't think he can play the position. But from a fantasy standpoint, my take is he will find a way to be on a starting.
No, I think that's
he's not good at playing quarterback. I'm not out here touting Justin Fields.
We've as a community proved time and time again that we don't care so much about whether they're a good quarterback or not. Can you give me fantasy points? Right. So
yep. And the last thing I'll say before I move on to my trade, and Brian playing with me for a few years, being in that chat with me for a few years, I think you can back me up on this. I do not dislike the Chicago Bears. I am a homer for the Packers. I was a big Fields guy for the first couple years that he was around. Finally, this being year 3, I just no longer see it. Or to put it a different way, I do see it now. I see that he can't play, and that I need to move on. So it's not a Bears hate with me. I really want the NFL is better when the Bears are good. I just don't ever want them to be better than the Packers. But I would like the Bears to not be the laughingstock of the league. Plus, all my friends and family are Bears fans living in the Chicago area. So I do have some sympathy for the Bears and especially their fans. But I will keep it moving to one of the trades that I made this week. And I did manage to get a Nico Collins share after striking out like all week. I was sending you guys some of the offers that were getting rejected, like an early 24-second, 225 seconds, and Michael Mayer. And the guy's like, no. And so I forgot a couple of the other offers, but Nico was essentially being valued as a mid-first when I inquired about him. And so after I thought I struck out, I finally managed to make a trade in, Brian, you're in this league, a sitcom league where my team is straight middle of the pack and I don't have my first next year, which is not a great spot to be in. So the trade that I made is I gave up Jared Goff, JSN, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Marvin Mims for Deshaun Watson and Nico Collins. I've never been a Deshaun Watson guy. Brian knows I've always been against him, not even to get into the off-the-field stuff with him. I liked him a lot in Houston, but last year he didn't look like the same guy to me. I was not certain that he would flip back to being a top 5 quarterback. I think his time away from football, plus probably some of the mental stuff that comes with playing the position that might have been affecting him, that's not going to go away. But Deshaun Watson still has upside. He's only played, I think now 9 or 10 games total since Houston a couple years ago. So he could very well still be shaking off the rust. Jared Goff is what he is. Jared Goff's value will not fluctuate that much over the next couple of years. He's like a early second, maybe a couple seconds guy. Nobody really wants to trade a 1 for him, but they will if like they're desperate enough. He's going to give you solid mid QB2 production that could flirt with low end QB1 production in a good year. So Goff is not a guy that I really care that much about moving. JSN and Mims were the other part of the deal. JSN, obviously, I didn't want to give up too early on him, but I kind of viewed it as I know Nico Collins is good now. He might not be great. He might not be a top 10 guy. I know he's good. And I don't know JSN or even Marvin Mims. I don't know that they're good yet. I'm pretty sure Mims is good. I'm pretty sure JSN is somewhere between good and great. I still have a lot of hope for him. By the way, we didn't really touch a lot on him during the rookie segment, but JSN is a guy I think is fair to have some concern about, but also a great buy right now if you want to try and go increase your shares. But really, it just came down to Jared Goff. I'd rather have Deshaun Watson for the upside than Jared Goff. Okay, so let's say I'd rather have Deshaun Watson than Jared Goff. Now the question is, what am I going to pay to make that swap? And so then I'm calculating the difference between what's JSN and Mims versus Nico Collins. And I kind of came up with Nico and JSN are probably pretty similar right now. So I'm throwing Marvin Mims and Jared Goff for Deshaun Watson. And I'm good doing that. I'm good with kind of taking the gamble on the upside. But that's my trade of the week. That's kind of the process that went behind going into it. Brian, curious to hear what deal you got made this week.
I was going to say, Todd, why don't we just give our quick reactions? I like Watson more than Matt. I was surprised for him to make this trade. I like the trade for him, and I think that is the value I add here. JSN has some concerns, like you said, but it's not something that you should run away after 3 weeks, period.
Yep. Yeah, so just to reiterate the trade really quick, it was Goff, JSN, Marvin Mims, and you acquired Watson and Nico Collins. One thing, you got this trade done before week 3, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Nico took a little bit of a hit. I acquired a Nico also. So we took a little bit of a hit after a poor week. I think he's going to be fine. I'm not really worried about it. I do like that upgrade to Watson. I think that maybe this is a decent time to sell off on Goff and maybe try to tier into that upper tier. So I like the move. From that aspect, I don't love selling out on JSN just yet. So that would be where I would be a little bit uncomfortable. But Deshaun Watson, you kind of banked on him this past week, and he looked really good. He did go against the Titans. So I like getting into that Watson tier. I think probably in the offseason, if we looked at the startup pick value of what this was, we'd be like, whoa, you got into the early second with Deshaun Watson and didn't pay a whole lot. So I think the sell high of Goff is probably where I'm kind of excited about.
Yeah, I think that's valid. We're talking Seattle, so that kind of segues into my trade before we switch to the next thing. Again, just quick feedback on what you think of the trade. Good, bad, ugly, whatever the case is. So I gave in a tanker. I'm transitioning to more of a tanker. Kelsey, DK Metcalf, Zach Charbonneau, 24-2, 25-2. The 24-2 is projected later. 25-2 is my own. Hopefully I can get on track by that point. And I added T. Higgins and Brandon Ayuk after the Thursday night before Sunday or Monday. So I did not have Ayuk's score in my starting lineup, which is kind of what I was going for. Not that I want to go that short of a term thought process, but it helps every little bit when you're tanking this year for sure. We've all seen it. And then T. Higgins, he was coming off of a bad week 1, great week 2, another not great week 3. Didn't love what I saw, some drops, yada, yada, yada. But I'm a T. Higgins guy. We've talked about him before. Todd, you were a buyer What do you think about this trade first?
Well, my name on Twitter is Trade for T. So, I love T. Higgins, and I love Ayuk. I've got a lot of shares of Ayuk too. So both of them are one of my more highly shared wide receivers. One question I have. So let me reiterate the trade here. So it was Kelsey, DK, Charbonnet, 24-2 and 25-2. The 24-2 sounds like it'll be pretty early though. Is that right? Based on you tanking?
No, it's not my 24.
Not your 24-2.
Yeah, it's a later projected. I'm projecting later 24.
Okay. So, I mean, if I'm thinking about kind of like DK and Ayuk, I kind of wrap them up as pretty similar. Basically same tier. So you're basically looking at Kelsey, Charb, and then 2 2s for T. Feels a little pricey, if I'm being quite honest, but there's a timeline that you've got to get rid of a guy like Kelsey if you're trying to tank. And giving up a couple late 2s doesn't give me a ton of heartburn. I'm really not high on Charbonnet. I mean, I think that Kenneth Walker is really the guy there. Charbonnet feels like expensive AJ Dillon from a year ago.
So quick context and what my receiver room would be. It would be Olave, Garrett Wilson, Devontae, and then adding these 2. So that's my 5 wide receiver room. So, and I have 2 quarterbacks that are strong. One of which Kyler, so that it's like the tank build that we're talking about. So just context, I don't know if that matters or not, but Matt, does that shift you at all? Like Todd thinks that I probably overpaid, and I agree. Does that shift anything knowing what that wide receiver room is longevity wise, just in terms of potential wise?
Yeah, it always shifts things for me to understand the context. Because I agree with Todd. In a vacuum, that seems pricey. Just in a vacuum, I feel like Kelsey and DK should equal T and Ayuk, but I could be wrong on that. But I just knowing where Kelsey was going, like Kelsey was going ahead of Higgins in a lot of startup drafts this summer, or they were in a very similar spot. So I think the deal is good for your team. I am surprised that you had to pay that much. I would have thought that DK, Kelsey, maybe a 24-2 gets it done. To your point, if these seconds are projected late, they're probably not really moving the needle a whole lot for the other owner either. Like you said, you don't really care about them in Sharp. The other owner probably doesn't, but needed to feel like they were getting something more. So I'm okay with the deal. I think overall, you're like most of your teams, you have it positioned really strongly next year. It does feel like a little bit of a sticker shock in terms of like what Kelsey provides to contending teams, and going back to our veteran segment, like what the team, a lot of people are willing to pay, a mid first and second, closer to 2 late firsts for Kelsey. So that's why
I'd push back a little bit on the Kelsey T. Higgins thing. I don't think you can trade Kelsey for a wide receiver in that top 10 range. If we're talking about, Garrett Wilson's kind of dropped down to that range now, like the Waddle, the Devontae Smith. I don't think that Kelsey's really, maybe on an extreme circumstance, but I think from across the board. So I think I wouldn't have any issue with Kelsey a little bit plus to get to T. And I think really, that's like a 25-2 or a late 2. I'm always trying to get rid of those late 2s at this time of year. People are valuing them. People are like adding the 2, or maybe even later in the year, like for the trade deadline. I'm very happy to get rid of my late 2 and tier up. Now, I think you paid a lot. I don't think it's a crazy amount. I think you probably just paid like an extra 2. You probably paid the T. Higgins coming off a 28-point game tax. Is probably what happened. Exactly. And Ayuk also coming off a huge game tax. It's kind of like a little double whammy. So I don't have much issue with it because I love both those guys.
It's one of those things situationally.
Go ahead, Matt. The one last thing I would say is I can see them being in a similar tier, but I would much rather have Brandon Ayuk than DK Metcalf. I would probably pay a late second to upgrade, in my opinion, to Brandon Ayuk. I think if Brandon Ayuk and DK Metcalf just switch teams right now, if they were just traded for each other, I think Brandon Ayuk's probably a top 7 or 8 wide receiver the rest of the season. I think CMC, Kittle, and Debo are the only thing holding Brandon Ayuk back from regular top 10 finishes. So overall, I don't think it's a bad trade. It seems a little bit pricey, but you accomplished your goals with it, which is amazing.
So I think this is a good transition into our last segment here that we're calling closing price. So this is something that we want to do weekly, where we're going to wrap with one person that we've each targeted, or either for a buy or a sell, and then one person for this upcoming week that's buy or sell. So last week we talked about my guy was to buy was Garrett Wilson. Matt, yours was Nico Collins. Todd, AJ Brown. I can speak from my perspective. I didn't have any success. I didn't want to force anything with Garrett Wilson. He's still being maybe a little bit. I still think there's a good buy window that is opening or staying open with Zach Wilson and their tragic quarterback situation. But what are we thinking in terms of Nico here? Did we land any Nico, Matt?
One in this trade that he just gave.
Yep.
I did land one, and I paid a heavy price. I was tanking. I'll quickly get into it. I was tanking. I had Breece Hall. Matt, you touched on earlier, having a expensive running back on a tank team is extremely uncomfortable. Every week I was going into the game just like crossing my fingers. Can I make it through this week? To have an opportunity to sell. My ultimate goal was to sell him once the value increased back to like that RB2 range, and I just didn't have the stomach for it. So I ended up selling Breece Hall for a 24-1 and Nico, which doesn't sound great. It is a bit pricey. I am very high on Nico, though. I'm very optimistic. If you look at his targets over the last 15, 16 games, I think you'd be shocked. So I would just challenge you to go look at each person listening, just go look at his targets. It's pretty impressive. I'm pretty high on Stroud. I don't have a lot of Stroud, but the way I'm going to get involved with him is through Nico, is through Tank Dell. So yeah, it was a little bit expensive. It served a dual purpose. I protected myself against the vulnerability of an expensive running back. I got rid of some points. I've grabbed a first, and I've grabbed a receiver that I'm probably higher than on market.
Yeah, I love that trade. We're all in that league together. As soon as I saw it, I kind of smiled, especially with like our buy segment last week, and I was like, "Damn, man! Like that's a nice one." Like, I just think it's a very even trade. I think it was a smart trade for you and the other guy. So I don't really have much more to add than that. I just really like it. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah. I was a little uncomfortable with the deal, but I totally get it for your situation. So that's kind of where I'm at. Not much.
I think I probably lost.
We know the risk.
In my opinion, probably like a second is at least what I've missed out on. But
yeah, so that's kind of where I am. I'm not concerned for what you're going to do with the value long term. So.
And before we get to kind of our recommended buys to close out the episode, I would say the reason I love that, or the reason I really like that trade for you, is because it was very hard for me to trade for Nico Collins this week. Like we mentioned, I offered Michael Mayer in 3 seconds for him, and the guy didn't even counter me. In a different league, a guy who's contending, I offered him Deontay Johnson, a mid-second and 2/3 next year. Again, he didn't even counter. So the guys with Nico Collins, they were not even countering. They had no interest in selling. I found him an extremely difficult guy to buy, even going into it with the mentality of, I'm going to buy high on this guy. So I guess from that perspective, I'm kind of looking at, okay, well, Nico's pretty valuable, man. So yeah, I'll take Nico in a first for him. I can also see the other side from Brian's perspective, though. So overall, I just think it's a good deal.
So I think last week we talked about buys in this closing price discussion. This week, let's shift it to sells. And who are we looking to sell this week? Brian, I'll let you kind of start it off. you got a lot of options to sell across your league. So who are you looking to sell as we wrap up on closing price?
Like you said, there's a lot of options. One person that maybe that window is starting to close, but I've successfully in the last week traded Ramondre Stevenson for a 25-1. So Matt talked about, buying a year out futures. Contenders are going to pay that type of stuff. That you all have win now guys in your league. If you're not one of them, that are going to say, well, I don't know if I'm alive in 2025. I'll buy Ramondre and add a cheap running back 2, 3, whatever it is. So that is my suggestion, that people will go out and where you can afford or you're tanking, sell Ramondre for a 25-1. Matt, how about you?
So my one sell would be one that Todd doesn't want to hear. Man, get off Fields, man. Just trade Fields. I don't have the stomach for the risk, so Fields would just be my sell. I totally understand if people don't agree with me, but
I don't want to belabor the segment because this just be kind of quick. But I view myself as a Fields buyer. I went back and forth with this person on the Fields for a couple days and a lot of different counters. This was my max offer that I was willing to go. Yeah. So if you are a Fields bag holder, are you willing to move for a late 25-1 and late 25-2? Because that was I feel like I'm a buyer, and that was the most I was willing to go.
I'm not a good person to ask that question to.
But you would probably take that.
Yes. I would take any first. I would take any. I would take any first from any.
All right, that's fair.
He's taking anything.
Anything. Just give me something.
Yes, yeah. He wants him off the team. Yeah.
All right. So I will wrap us up here. So I, over the last probably 18 months, have added a lot of Tutu Atwell off the wire for 100% free 99. I've never traded for him, but he at one point this offseason was one of my most owned receivers. I've got him on a lot of tank teams for one, so I'm really trying to get him off those tank teams, but I'm looking to sell Tutu Atwell. Even on my contenders where I've got him, if I'm a contender, I'm not starting him. I don't foresee a time when I'm starting him. So I'm looking to sell him. I'm looking to get a mid-2 for Tutu Atwell. So I sold one last week for an early 3. So this week I'm upgrading that to a mid-2. So Tutu Atwell is who I'm looking to move off my rosters.
Yep, love that.
All right,
absolutely.
So not a real exciting player, but we'll wrap it up there. So we really appreciate you all for joining us on the Dynasty Market Watch for the 102 episode. Would be great if you guys could give us a retweet from the podcast, from our Twitter accounts, and give us a review on Spotify. For Brian, for Matt, I'm Todd. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Peace.